Welcome to True Echo, where untold stories rise to the surface and justice echoes louder than the lies that tried to bury it. Today's story is one of power, silence, and the woman who changed the rules of the game with a whisper. Stay tuned. The soft chime of glass doors echoed through the lobby of First National Bank as Alicia Bennett stepped inside. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind where routine wrapped itself around every corner of the room. Tellers tapped away at keyboards, a few clients scribbled forms in silence, and the overhead hum of fluorescent lights barely competed with the low murmur of voices. Alicia's entrance, however, made no impression at all, at least, not at first. She wore a modest white blouse tucked into faded jeans, and canvas shoes with worn soles. Her small leather purse hung neatly from her shoulder. To the casual observer, she could have been anyone, a schoolteacher, a retired nurse, maybe someone picking up forms for a local charity. Certainly not someone worth remembering. Behind the teller counter, two young women, Emily and Sarah, stood side by side, glancing up at Alicia with visible disinterest. Emily, who prided herself on recognizing high-value clients from a mile away, immediately dismissed Alicia's presence with a raised eyebrow. Sarah leaned toward her and whispered, "Probably just another overdraft customer." They shared a quick, stifled laugh. Alicia waited patiently in line. She didn't fidget, didn't glance at her phone, didn't display even the smallest sign of frustration. She simply stood, calm and composed, her eyes lowered but observant. When her turn came, Emily waved her forward with a forced smile and a tone dipped in superiority. "Yes, ma'am. How may I help you today?" she asked, already half distracted. Alicia stepped up and looked her in the eye. "I'd like to withdraw $500, please." Emily blinked. She paused, glanced at Sarah, and then tilted her head. "Excuse me." "500, Alicia repeated. Emily smirked and tapped at her keyboard. "Of course. Do you have your account number?" As Alicia handed her a small bank card, Sarah leaned over and muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Hope she doesn't ask for change in quarters." They chuckled, drawing looks from nearby tellers. Alicia caught the exchange. Her expression didn't flinch. But a subtle shift occurred in her eyes, no longer passive, but calculating. She saw everything, the mockery, the assumptions, the smugness beneath their smiles. When Emily confirmed the account and glanced at the balance, her smirk faltered. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. The number didn't match the image of the woman standing in front of her. Miss Bennett," Emily said, her tone beginning to shift. "Is this your account?" "Yes," Alicia answered, her tone as serene as ever. Sarah peeked over at the monitor, saw the balance, and gasped under her breath. It wasn't just high. It was astronomical. Before Emily could say another word, Alicia leaned slightly forward, her voice calm but commanding. "Actually, I've changed my mind. I'd like to withdraw $2 billion. The air froze. Emily blinked. What? 2 billion, Alicia repeated, each syllable clear as crystal. Across the room, heads turned. The security guard by the door stiffened. The branch manager, Richard Thompson, standing near his office, looked up sharply at the word billion. He frowned and made his way over. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone polite but wary. Emily stammered. She asked to withdraw $2 billion. Richard turned his gaze to Alicia. "Ma'am, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Alicia interrupted gently. "But if you're unsure, perhaps you should read this." From her purse, she retrieved a weathered envelope, its edges worn and slightly curled. She placed it on the counter between them. Richard hesitated, but something in her tone made him pick it up. As he unfolded the contents, his breath hitched. Lines of text, complex account codes, and signatures appeared, most notably, one from a man he hadn't heard mentioned in years, James Bennett. Richard's hands trembled as he read. He looked back at Alicia, and suddenly, he saw her differently, not as a quiet woman in old shoes, but as someone who had just shattered the illusion of his control. "Miss Bennet," he said, almost breathless, "I think we should talk." "In my office." Alicia nodded once. As she followed him through the bank, the murmurs behind her grew louder. Tellers leaned over desks. Clients whispered behind their hands. But Alicia never looked back. Her steps were measured, purposeful, the calm before a storm no one saw coming. Inside Richard's office, the walls suddenly felt too close. Richard closed the door behind them, trying to maintain professionalism. "Miss Bennet," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "this document, it can't be real." "It's real," Alicia replied. "My husband prepared it years ago. He knew this day would come." "James Bennet," Richard murmured. "That's impossible." He vanished. "The authorities." Alicia raised a hand gently. "I'm not here to explain everything. I'm here to reclaim what's mine." She opened her purse again and withdrew a second envelope, sleek, sealed, and stamped in red. She slid it across the desk. "This one's for the chairman." Richard paled. This isn't how things are done," he protested. "It is now," Alicia said softly. Outside the office, tension crackled like electricity. Sarah sat frozen at her desk, recalling the balance on Alicia's account. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a massive mistake. Alicia wasn't lost. She wasn't confused. She was waiting. And now, the reckoning had begun. Richard Thompson sat behind his desk, his face drained of color as he stared at the envelope Alicia had just handed him. His fingers hovered over it like it might explode. The red seal alone sent alarm bells through his mind. It was the bank's highest-level emergency insignia, reserved for internal crises and board-level interventions. And now, it was in the hands of a woman he'd just mocked by proxy, based on her shoes and her modest request. "Miss Bennet," Richard said, trying to re-establish the upper hand, "you have to understand, we don't usually process these kinds of requests without verifying that I'm not crazy. Or poor." Alicia's voice was gentle, but the words struck like a whip. Richard swallowed hard. "I'm not here to cause a spectacle," she continued. "But I will not be dismissed." He opened the envelope. Inside were multiple documents, notarized ownership transfers, multi-jurisdictional financial authorizations, a map of high-level shell corporations, and at the very bottom, a signed letter addressed directly to the chairman of First National Bank, William Harrington. The signature was unmistakable. James T. Bennet. It was real. Richard dropped the envelope on the desk, leaned back, and ran a hand through his thinning hair. "I don't understand." James Bennet disappeared in 2018. The FBI investigated. The SEC launched audits. Nobody ever found anything. Alicia's gaze was unwavering. That was the point. Outside the office, Sarah Mitchell was frantically typing. She'd seen Richard's face go pale and knew something beyond routine banking was unfolding. Her curiosity got the better of her. She opened a restricted system folder she technically didn't have access to, typing in a backdoor admin code she'd seen a tech support rep use once during a software update. She searched for Alicia Bennet. Nothing. Then she searched for James Bennet. A list popped up, and at the top of it, Project Gemini, status, sealed. Executives only. With trembling fingers, Sarah clicked. A warning popped up, security clearance required, level 10. She bypassed it with the same backdoor. What she saw made her gasp audibly. Dozens of offshore accounts. Shell corporations. Private wealth funds disguised as public trust accounts. But the name that jumped out and froze her blood was Alicia Bennet. Not just mentioned, but listed as a controlling party in the event of James Bennet's incapacitation. She looked up just as the lights flickered. A low hum of tension now buzzed through the bank. Everyone could feel it. Back in the office, Richard finally found his voice again. So you're saying this money, this entire structure, he left it all to you? Alicia nodded once. He knew this day would come. He said, if they laugh at you, let them. Their ignorance is the key that opens every locked door. Richard stood up and moved toward the window, staring out at the lobby. The other staff members had noticed the change in energy. Some were whispering. Others stared directly at his office. Even the security guard had his hand resting on his walkie-talkie. Does the chairman know about this? Richard asked, not turning around. Not yet. But he will. Just then, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced down. It was a direct call from William Harrington's office. He picked it up quickly. Yes. The voice on the other end was clipped, impatient. Why did you just open the Harrington channel? What is going on in your branch? Richard lowered his voice. Sir, we have a situation. Alicia Bennett is here, with documents from James. There was a pause. Then, don't let her leave. What? I'm getting on a plane. Do not let her leave. The line went dead. Richard turned back toward Alicia. He's coming here. Chairman Harrington himself. Alicia showed no reaction. Then I suggest we both prepare. Outside, Sarah sat frozen at her desk, the weight of what she'd seen sinking in. She quickly closed the restricted files, but the damage was done. Her mind reeled with what this all meant. Alicia Bennett wasn't some widow making a desperate claim. She was the secret heir to the most dangerous and powerful fortune the bank had ever hidden. And Sarah, along with everyone else, had mocked her. Suddenly, the glass doors at the front of the bank opened again. Two men entered, both tall, dressed in black suits, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. They didn't approach a counter. They didn't speak. They simply scanned the room and posted themselves silently by the entrance. Security didn't question them. Alicia glanced toward the door and gave a small nod, almost imperceptible. Richard saw it and his mouth went dry. You brought bodyguards? No, Alicia said quietly. I brought witnesses. Richard sat down slowly, gripping the armrests like the ground beneath him had shifted. This wasn't a request. It was a reckoning. And First National Bank had just stepped into the storm. Silence reigned as Richard Thompson stared across his desk at Alicia Bennett. Outside his glass office walls, the mood had shifted from everyday monotony to full-scale panic masked by artificial calm. Staff members whispered in corners, glancing repeatedly toward the two silent men standing by the front entrance. The kind of men who didn't ask for coffee or sit down in lobbies. They simply watched. And waited. Richard adjusted his tie with trembling fingers. Miss Bennett. Alicia. I think we're past formalities now. Just, help me understand. Why come here like this? Dressed like that? Her lips curled slightly. Because the costume mattered more to you than the credentials. She stood slowly and walked toward the window overlooking the lobby. Her calm presence reminded Richard of something deadly and inevitable, like a tide slowly pulling the shore away grain by grain. I didn't come here to impress anyone, she said without turning. I came to watch how quickly people revealed who they really are. Richard flinched. And what did you learn? Alicia turned her head slightly, not enough to meet his eyes. That power doesn't expose people. Arrogance does. Before Richard could respond, his intercom crackled to life. Sir, this is security. There's a convoy approaching the front lot. Black SUVs. 4 vehicles. No markings. They're requesting immediate access and full privacy. Richard's heart plummeted. He glanced at Alicia. They're early, she said, almost to herself. Who is that? Richard asked, throat dry. Alicia looked at him now, her eyes steely and direct. People who don't knock. The tension broke like a bone snapping under pressure. Richard stumbled to his desk, grabbed the intercom. Tell them we'll open the west side garage entrance. Bring them straight to the executive wing. Avoid the lobby. Understood. Richard wiped the sweat from his brow and turned to Alicia. You're orchestrating this. All of it. No, she said. James did. I'm just turning the page. As the minutes passed, a heavy, palpable stillness gripped the bank. Customers were quietly ushered out under the guise of a network error. The lights dimmed slightly. The security guard locked the front doors. Tellers powered down their terminals one by one. By the time the SUVs rolled to a halt outside, the building had become a ghost branch. Sarah Mitchell watched everything unfold with wide, terrified eyes. She couldn't stop replaying Alicia's entrance, how she dismissed her, laughed even. She kept flashing back to the glowing balance she'd seen for just a second on her monitor. An account that shouldn't have existed. An amount that couldn't be real. The elevator pinged. The doors opened to reveal Chairman William Harrington. Even at 73, he commanded presence. His silver hair was immaculately groomed, his pinstripe suit tailored within an inch of his life. His bodyguard stepped out before him, scanning the area like wolves assessing a forest for threats. The employees froze. Harrington didn't glance at anyone. He walked with slow, deliberate steps toward Richard's office, nodding only slightly at the two suited men Alicia had brought. They nodded back. Predators recognizing predators. He entered the office without knocking. Alicia didn't move. She stood by the window, poised like a queen in exile who knew the crown was still hers. Alicia, Harrington said. William, she replied. She didn't turn. I see the rumors were true. They were always more than rumors. You just chose not to believe them. Harrington's eyes narrowed. If you're here for revenge, you'll find the cost higher than you imagine. Alicia finally turned to face him. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for return. She opened her purse one last time and withdrew a third envelope. Sleek. Black. Embossed with the Bennett family crest, an emblem Harrington hadn't seen in a decade. She placed it on Richard's desk between them all. This is James' final move. Richard stepped back, not wanting to be the one to touch it. Harrington didn't hesitate. He broke the seal. Inside was a letter addressed directly to William Harrington. It was handwritten. William. If you're reading this, then I've disappeared, and you're responsible. But I never left anything to chance. I knew one day Alicia would need to walk into your house of glass and expose the stones you've been hiding. Every penny you laundered through my companies, every client you blackmailed with my networks, it's all documented. If you continue to resist, this letter will reach not just regulators, but newsrooms. Global ones. I've built redundancy upon redundancy. You underestimated me. But more fatally, you underestimated her. James T. Bennett. Silence. Richard staggered back. You built all this to trap him. Alicia's voice was soft. No. He built it to give me a choice. William Harrington lowered the letter with trembling hands. Alicia stepped closer. You thought I'd break when you erased my husband. When you buried our name under lies. But you forgot something, William. She leaned forward, voice low. You taught me how power works. Now you'll watch how it ends. For the first time in his long, tyrannical career, William Harrington said nothing. Because he knew. The Queen had come for the kingdom. And the reckoning had only just begun. The weight of silence in the room was no longer tense, it was suffocating. William Harrington stood stiffly, the black envelope still in his hand, its contents too damning to deny and too powerful to ignore. Alicia's eyes never left his face, watching for the moment realization would break through the fortress of his pride. Richard Thompson, still planted behind his desk, felt like a man witnessing the slow implosion of a monument he once worshipped. "You planned all this," Harrington muttered, though whether it was accusation or admission was unclear. "No," Alicia replied. "James did. I just followed the instructions. Every document. Every backup. Every trigger. He didn't just leave a will, he left a roadmap." She placed one more item on the table. A sleek USB drive marked only with a small silver B. Richard stared at it like it might explode. Alicia gestured toward it. "Encrypted files. The ones your own IT department never cracked. James left them in cold storage, air-gapped, time-released, and programmed to respond only if I accessed our joint accounts after his disappearance." She used air quotes deliberately. Richard shot a glance at Harrington, whose mask was now cracking. The chairman's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Behind his eyes swirled a storm of calculations, damage control, denial, deflection, but every route ended at Alicia. He finally spoke, voice low. "What do you want?" Alicia tilted her head. "Isn't it obvious? Full transfer of every account in Project Gemini. Immediate reinstatement of ownership over the Bennett trusts. And a public admission of liability from the board." "That's suicide," Richard breathed. Harrington clenched his fists. "You'll collapse the bank." Alicia leaned forward. "Then let it collapse. I'll build something better with the ashes." It was at that moment the power flickered again. The monitors in Richard's office rebooted, displaying a screen neither of them had seen before, something bypassing their core systems entirely. Gemini reactivated. Below it, blinking in pale blue. Authorized by Alicia M. Bennett. Key match confirmed. Vault access level, Supreme. Initiating Protocol Omega. Richard stumbled back. What is this?" Alicia's expression remained calm, but her eyes glinted. "My husband thought of everything. Including the day when your system would finally recognize me, not as a beneficiary, but as the new controller." From every monitor outside the office, gasps began to rise. Sarah Mitchell, still glued to her workstation, watched in horror as her terminal was overtaken by the same cryptic screen. Everyone's screens were. Tellers, managers, even the compliance officer's dashboard was overridden. One by one, access was revoked. And then replaced by one login name. Bennett_principal. Passwords failed. Firewalls fell. All system control rerouted to a single user. In the office, Harrington's voice cracked as he took a step forward. "This is an internal coup." "No," Alicia said simply. "This is restoration." The phone rang. Richard let it ring once, twice, then picked it up with shaking hands. "Why yes." A trembling voice responded, "This is the IT chief." "Sir, we've lost all administrative access. Someone just locked out every executive override. We can't even shut the servers down. She's in complete control." Richard turned to Alicia, panic overtaking his professional calm. "This is too far. You can't just hijack a global banking institution." "I didn't," she replied. "Your system recognized me. All I did was verify my identity, with the biometric key my husband embedded in the network years ago." She held up her left wrist and peeled back a thin adhesive sticker. Beneath it, a microchip glinted faintly under the light. Harrington staggered into the nearest chair. He knew. He finally understood. James hadn't just disappeared. He'd disappeared on purpose. Set the entire system to lie in wait. And built it all on her. "And now," Alicia said, her voice low, "we finish this." She took the seat across from Harrington. "You will sign a digital confession. You will call the board. You will step down immediately. Or I'll send every encrypted file to the Justice Department, Interpol, the IRS, and every financial regulatory body from Zurich to Singapore." "You'd burn it all down?" he asked hoarsely. Alicia smiled softly. "You already did. I'm just lighting the truth." Outside, the whispers had turned to stunned silence. On every screen across the bank, Alicia Bennett's name was now framed in gold. She hadn't just come to reclaim her husband's legacy. She'd come to become it. And now, no one could stop her. Alicia's name glowed from every monitor in the building, crowned by a quiet authority that no one could ignore now. The change had occurred. Not with screaming. Not with violence. But with precision, patience, and a system built in the shadows of corruption, and turned against itself by the very woman it tried to erase. William Harrington sat back in his chair, his breath shallow. For a man who had spent decades orchestrating mergers, manipulating markets, and burying secrets deeper than vaults, he looked suddenly small. His voice cracked with defeat. "You have no idea what you've done." Alicia crossed her legs slowly, folded her hands in her lap, and leaned back. "You're right. I don't know everything yet. But I know enough to make your lawyers nervous." Harrington chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "You think this ends with me? There are people on the board who will never let you keep that power. Project Gemini was created to shield us from government oversight and hostile takeovers. You activating that system puts a target on your back, Alicia." Alicia gave a quiet, thoughtful nod. "I'm aware. Which is why I never came alone." As if on cue, one of the two suited men guarding the entrance stepped into the office without knocking. He leaned close and whispered something into Alicia's ear. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Then she stood. "Mr. Thompson," she said, turning to Richard, "have your staff check the parking structure." "Why?" he asked, already fearing the answer. "Because the Department of the Treasury just arrived," she replied. "Along with representatives from the Office of Foreign Assets Control and the SEC. Richard's jaw went slack. "You called federal regulators?" "No," she said calmly. "James did. The moment Project Gemini was triggered. It was built into the system. Before Richard could process it, the intercom buzzed again. "Sir, there's a motorcade outside. Government plates. Armed escort. They're asking for you." Richard slumped back in his chair, dazed. Everything was unraveling, and Alicia stood untouched in the center of it all. She turned to Harrington again. "This is your final chance. Step down. Sign what I give you. And maybe, just maybe, I'll keep your name out of tomorrow's headlines." William scoffed, but his voice was trembling. "And if I don't?" Alicia took a small black folder from her purse and placed it gently on the desk between them. She opened it, revealing a collection of printed screenshots, email records, offshore wire transfers, all signed with Harrington's encrypted digital key. "Then I won't have to leak anything," she said. "Because the system you helped build is already leaking for me." She gestured to Richard. "Email it to the board. All of it. And tell them I'll see them in 48 hours. Richard stared at the folder, blinking slowly. "If I do this, you'll destroy the bank." "No," Alicia replied. "I'll rebuild it. Without the rot." Her voice was calm, but the room seemed to echo with the sound of an empire collapsing. Back in the lobby, Sarah Mitchell watched in disbelief as uniformed agents entered the building. Treasury, SEC, and even two people from Homeland Security. She couldn't take her eyes off the lead officer who walked with purpose and nodded once toward the teller counters. They weren't here to ask questions. They were here to collect evidence. Another staff member leaned toward Sarah and whispered, "What's happening?" Sarah could barely speak. The bank's real owner just walked in, and brought the U.S. government with her. Inside the office, Harrington finally broke. He slumped forward, resting his elbows on his knees, defeated. "You win," he muttered. No, Alicia replied gently. I endured. That's very different. She placed the final document in front of him. Sign. You'll retain your pension, your reputation, if you don't resist. With trembling hands, William Harrington signed away his chairmanship. The pen clicked. And with that small sound, an empire built on arrogance and corruption began its collapse. As Alicia turned to leave, she paused beside Richard. Don't make the same mistake twice, she said softly. The next person who walks in looking ordinary might be the one who signs your fate. Then she walked out. The lobby fell utterly silent. Even the federal agents paused as Alicia passed through the glass doors, her shoulders high, her steps unhurried, her purse swinging gently at her side like nothing in the world had ever gone wrong. But everything had. And now everything would change. Outside First National Bank, the air was heavy with the kind of stillness that only follows after a seismic shift. Reporters hadn't arrived yet, but inside, chaos reigned, quiet, contained, administrative chaos. Agents moved through the building like surgeons through a body riddled with infection, extracting files, imaging hard drives, interviewing stunned employees. And at the center of it all was one name, Alicia Bennett. Inside the executive office, William Harrington sat slumped in the corner, his once impeccable blazer wrinkled, his shirt collar undone. His eyes, once sharp and condescending, now darted aimlessly, like a man haunted by shadows he'd thought long buried. Richard Thompson stood at the window, watching Alicia disappear into a black SUV as it pulled from the curb. He had never seen a departure feel so final. So absolute. Sir, said a voice behind him. He turned. It was Sarah Mitchell, her face pale, her hands wringing nervously. She held a printed sheet in her hand. I accessed one last log entry before the IT team locked everything down, she said. It's from James Bennett. Richard frowned. You mean years ago? No, she said. It was time-stamped this morning. He snatched the paper from her hands. It wasn't long, just a few lines, but enough to freeze him where he stood. If you're reading this, the plan worked. Alicia has taken control. For those who dismissed her. Know this, power never truly disappears. It just waits for silence to speak. Underneath was James's signature. Unmistakable. Sarah stepped closer. Is it possible, he's alive? Richard didn't respond. His lips moved as if forming words, but nothing came. He looked back out the window, past the now parked government vehicles, past the agents, past the screen inside still flashing Alicia's name. Was James out there? Or had he simply orchestrated the greatest long game in banking history? Outside, in the SUV, Alicia sat motionless as the car drove toward her next destination. She didn't speak. She didn't look back. Only once the bank had fully disappeared from view did she reach into her purse and take out her phone. A single message had arrived. Unknown number. Transaction complete. System integrity verified. Are you ready for the next step? J. She didn't breathe for a moment. Then, slowly, Alicia typed. Yes. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked the phone and placed it back into her purse. She whispered to herself, "Come back to me." The driver glanced at her in the mirror. "Ma'am?" "Nothing," she said quietly. "Just thinking out loud." Across town, news of the federal raid had begun trickling onto social media. A few photos snapped by bypassers showed men in suits exiting First National. Rumors swirled. Insider trading. Corporate scandal. Cyber breach. But no one guessed the truth, that the most powerful figure in the building had walked in wearing $30 shoes and left with a billion-dollar empire. Inside the bank, agents discovered Project Gemini's digital framework was beyond their comprehension. Hidden backdoors, biometric locks, and time-based encryption protocols protected files that would take weeks, even months, to decode, unless someone handed them the key. And only one person had it. Alicia. In the break room, Sarah Mitchell sat alone, her head in her hands. She remembered everything about that morning, how she laughed at Alicia, mocked her, judged her by her clothes and tone. And now, the entire institution bore her name. For a brief moment, Sarah thought about submitting her resignation. But then she remembered the way Alicia had walked out, unapologetic, composed, and quietly righteous. Maybe, just maybe, Alicia hadn't come to destroy the bank. Maybe she'd come to save it, from itself. And those willing to learn, might still have a place in the future she was building. The next 48 hours sent shockwaves through the global financial world. Headlines screamed across front pages. First National Bank under federal investigation after surprise takeover. Who is Alicia Bennett? The woman who quietly seized $1 billion network. Project Gemini exposed, secret accounts, global fraud, and a long-dead name returns. Inside a sealed boardroom in Manhattan, the remaining executives of First National sat in stunned silence as Alicia Bennett entered, not with a legal team, not with a press entourage, but alone. She wore a tailored gray suit. Simple. Immaculate. Her hair tied back. No jewelry except a silver watch and a plain wedding band. At the head of the boardroom table, a silver nameplate that once read, William Harrington, Chairman, had been replaced. It now read simply, Chairwoman, Alicia Bennett. No one dared speak first. She stood at the head of the table and let the silence do the work. I'm not here to play by your rules, she said at last. Because they were written to protect thieves in suits. I'm not here to burn the bank to the ground, though some of you deserve it. I'm here to rebuild it into something no one will ever be ashamed to walk into again. One of the older board members, a grizzled executive named Jonathan Marks, leaned forward cautiously. Do you really think you can run this institution alone? I don't plan to, she replied. I'll bring in people who know what struggle means. Who know what it feels like to be told they're too poor, too quiet, too black, too female. The ones you never promoted because they didn't fit the culture. Another board member, nervously adjusting his tie, muttered, You think that's how global finance works? Alicia fixed him with a look that sliced through excuses. No. I think that's how it should work. And you're about to see what happens when someone who's been silent her whole life finally takes the mic. The room quieted again. Then, to the surprise of all, Jonathan Marks gave a slow nod. I've seen a lot of coups in this business, he said. But this is the first time I've seen one that feels like justice. He slid his nameplate aside and stood. I resign, he said. Effective immediately. But I'll watch what you do next, and hope it's everything this place was supposed to be. Others followed. Some resigned, some stayed, but none protested. Because deep down, they all knew, Alicia hadn't stolen power. She had restored it. And her throne had been there all along, just covered by the dust of their assumptions. Later that evening, in her quiet downtown apartment, Alicia finally let her shoulders drop. She took off her shoes, hung up her jacket, and sat at the small kitchen table where she and James once shared morning coffee. The city lights blinked outside her window, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You did it. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. I'll be in touch soon. Jay. She read the message twice. Then a third time. Was it really him? Still alive? Watching from the shadows? Or had James simply scheduled that message, one last nudge of hope in the aftermath of his grand design? Either way, Alicia smiled. Just a little. Not because she had one. But because she had become the kind of woman who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. She walked to the window, staring out over the city skyline. Her reflection shimmered in the glass, superimposed over the towers she now had the power to reshape. She whispered softly into the night, You gave me the map, James. Now let me finish the journey. The screen faded to black. And the words appeared. Never underestimate a quiet woman. Especially one who's been underestimated all her life. Her silence is her strategy. Her story is your reckoning. Alicia Bennett didn't walk into that bank to make a scene, she walked in to make history. Her story is a reminder that the strongest voices often begin in silence, and the most powerful moves are made after years of being overlooked. In her own words, I endured. That's very different from winning. If Alicia's journey inspired you, if you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or underestimated, let this story be your reminder, the world doesn't get to decide your value. You do. So what would you reclaim if you stopped playing by their rules? Comment below. Subscribe for more powerful, real-feeling stories from True Echo. And as always, never stay silent when you've got truth on your side.